If we are presented with a question how to live, we think that the answer is straightforward, that is, to live well. Yet, this is not how many people are living, is it? Especially if you're into Dostoevsky and resonate with him like I did, I wonder how well you'll rate your life. So here today, we're gonna talk about how not to live well with reference to one of Dostoevsky's earlier works, Notes from Underground. I have rewritten my original analysis and I'd like to share it with you today. Notes from Underground is a diary by an unnamed narrator in his 40s. There are two parts to the book. The first part is a reflection of his worldview in his 40s, and the second part is a recount of 3 events that happened earlier in his 20s. The 3 events are: 1. His encounter with an officer who moved him aside on the street. 2. His encounter with old schoolmates during the farewell party for an acquaintance. And 3. His encounter with a girl who caught his eye at a brothel. So we're going to discuss his worldview and how his worldview is played out in these events. Alright, how not to live well, tip number 1. To take irrationality as the hallmark of freedom. The narrator purports that humans are irrational and that irrationality of humans is the hallmark of our freedom. This seems to be the theme for other subsequent works by Dostoevsky, that humans are not rational creatures and would, more often than not, sabotage ourselves. Here in the book, the narrator tells us that he sees being irrational as an exercise of his freedom. People are irrational because we are free. He despises mathematical certainty and claims that human existence cannot be taken in the form of twice 2 equals 4 kind of logic. Mathematical formulations always give the same expected answer, but we humans with our freedom, we are unexpected. The narrator opines that humans do not want what is reasonable or beneficial because we want to assert our agency, and he calls this the most advantageous advantage, for the sake of which a man, if necessary, is ready to act in opposition to all laws, that is, in opposition to reason, honor, peace, prosperity. In fact, in opposition to all those excellent and useful things. Such an advantage to the narrator is independent choice. Humans want to escape automation, to escape the pre-programming from nature and nurture, as put nicely in the freehand painting scene in the movie Ex Machina. The freehand painting by Jackson Pollock is a metaphor of the non-structured nature of human existence. It is messy art. In the movie, the unexpectedness of freedom lies in the creative way a free being makes use of the resources to attain a goal, even though the goal is pre-programmed, that is for the AI robot to escape. Here in the book, the unexpectedness of freedom championed by the narrator is self-destruction. He constantly sabotages himself as a means to assert his free will, to assert what he calls our personality, our individuality. This self-destructive tendency is rooted in the fear of being defined. He fears being defined by the beaten path, such that he rushed headlong on another path, simply disliking the beaten track, and have obstinately, willfully struck out another difficult, absurd way, seeking it almost in the darkness. He sees the conventional path as dulling his special snowflake's sparkle. He wants to go the underground way to prove a point that he is different, that he is a human with character whose will cannot be bent by society. Yet, instead of constructing his own path, he destroys all paths for himself. The narrator mentions that a person loves chaos and destruction because he is instinctively afraid of attaining his object and completing the edifice he is constructing. He fears that he is defined by the project which he creates and that the entirety of his identity would then be concretized by the project. Hence, he seeks to destroy everything that he may have constructed so that he cannot be defined by anything. This stalls his action as well. He does not act because he is afraid that his actions will lead to some outcome that would define him. He says, "I have never been a coward at heart, though I have always been a coward in action." He is a coward in action because he is afraid his actions will define him as a person, and thus he chooses not to act at all or to act in the worst possible way, thinking that this is emblematic of his freedom. The narrator's self-sabotaging, self-hating tendencies can be seen as stemming from his high unrealistic standards he has for himself. He writes that, "It is clear to me now, owing to my unbounded vanity and to the high standard I set for myself, I often looked at myself with furious discontent which verged on loathing, and so I inwardly attribute the same feeling to everyone." His resentment for the others is a reflection of his self-resentment. He injures himself because he is upset that he is not able to attain the high standards he set for himself. He has very low self-worth, perhaps precisely because he wants to think so impossibly highly of himself. When a person deems his potential to be godly, and he evaluates his current position, which is a far cry from his ideal, it is no wonder that he would thus think of himself as a mouse and not as a man. He beats himself up as the nastiest, stupidest, absurdest, and the most envious of all the worms on earth. He punishes himself for not being where he thinks he ought to be, and he enjoys punishing himself in such a way as he sinks into despair. He sees in despair they are the most intense enjoyments, especially when one is very acutely conscious of the hopelessness of one's position. Such attribution of pleasure to despair then further serves as a justification not to do anything to get out of the despair. The narrator's conception of freedom seems to run contrary to the very notion of freedom. The response to the question how to live is simply not to do anything or to do the worst possible thing, just not to live properly. This sounds ridiculous, but I have a lot of sympathy for this sentiment because I succumb to this kind of dumb reasoning too. There was a period of time in my past where I did not let myself be happy because I was afraid that whenever I was happy, something bad would happen to take the happiness away from me. So my warped logic was that if I was not happy to begin with, then nothing could take this non-existent happiness away from me, and I would not suffer any pain or loss. What is implicit in my thinking is that happiness is supposed to last forever, and if I am happy, I'm supposed to be happy all the time. This is obviously an unrealistic expectation to have. There is a delusional grandiosity that I was holding on to. Similarly, like the narrator, there is a grandiosity that he is holding on which impedes his action. He does not want to construct anything because he does not want to be defined by something less than perfect, something negative. In his encounter with an officer who moved him aside on the street, the narrator imagines ways of getting back at the officer but fails to actually do so multiple times. This incident affected the narrator deeply as he takes the act of the officer as an infringement of his personal space. He probably feels that his right to exist in a space has been taken away from him. Indignant as he is, the narrator does not dare to confront the officer and imagines ways to get back at the officer, including writing a letter and demanding an apology from the officer. He lives in his imagination because he does not have the power to do anything. He is afraid that doing anything would compromise his selfhood, as discussed earlier. It is arguable that he is afraid of the consequences too. He is a coward in action because he does not want to bear any consequence of his actions. There are no consequences to bear in imagination. But why are we afraid of bearing consequences? We are not afraid of bearing good consequences, are we? We are afraid of bearing bad consequences. So why not we take a chance to act? Well, because we only want good consequences. This is similar to my past expectation that if I were to be happy, I have to be always happy. This is unrealistic and is also very entitled. Being unrealistic and entitled is going to hold us back from experiencing life. We retreat from life because we think that we are incapable of having all the good things happen to us, that we feel unworthy of all the good things that we expect ourselves to have, and hold on to a very low self-worth like the narrator. Even though the narrator claims himself to be timid as a mouse in action, he has a desire to destroy others. He wants to regain control over others whom he perceives as weak in order to satisfy his narcissism. He recalls that he had a friend in the past over whom he had exercised unbounded sway, but when his friend devoted himself to the narrator entirely, the narrator began to hate him immediately and repulsed him. The narrator merely wants to subjugate his friend to show that he has such power. His wanting to impose superiority over others is also revealed in his encounter with his old schoolmates, where he longed all at once to insult them in the most flagrant manner and then go away. Yet, when he meets them, he makes a fool of himself, and this is probably his self-sabotaging tendencies acting up to embarrass himself and justify to himself that he is unworthy of anything. Similarly, he admits that it was the exercise of his power that attracted him most when he gave a speech to Lisa on love and family life. He wants to show that he is a well-read intellectual whose worldview is more sophisticated than Lisa's, so as to put her down. When doing so, he sprouts cliches and is even called out by Lisa for speaking like a book. Towards the end, he wants to humiliate Lisa by giving her money, insinuating that she is a whore that he pays for, and these are very violent and mean things to do to other people. German-American thinker Erich Fromm mentions in his book The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness that sadism is the transformation of impotence into the experience of omnipotence. Fromm flags out the distinction between power over people versus power to do something. Power over seeks to destroy others, while power to seeks to construct something for oneself. The sadist exercises power over people to mask his inability to exert power to construct anything for himself. The narrator wants to exercise power over people because he cannot exercise any power to do things to enrich his life experiences. This is because he's held back by his fears, narcissism, and entitlement. Fromm also suggests that there is a symbiotic relationship between sadism and masochism, that is, the desire to exert control and the desire to be controlled, right? Because in dominating the other, the sadist submits the fulfillment of his needs to the other party. The sadist makes another being an extension of himself and does not have a center in himself. This view may be one of the explanations why the narrator does not know what to do once he subjugates his friend, because his friend becomes a part of him, the very being from which he is running away. Okay, how to not live well? Tip number 2. Escape from others and from self. Escape from others. The narrator has a desire to stay hidden. The notion of underground also points to this hiddenness. He was fearfully afraid of being seen, of being met, of being recognized. He cites a mundane example of suffering from a toothache. He moans just to let people know that he is in pain, but he uses his expression of pain to alienate himself from others, because his mourning is somewhat an act, which is not the manner which he would mourn with a toothache. He inwardly understands that he might mourn differently, without thrills and flourishes. Perhaps he thinks that no one can actually understand or feel his pain, and he wants to retreat under a performance so as to maintain this distance from others. He wants to protect his sense of identity for fear that others would compromise it. Yet, in another interpretation, we can also see that the narrator has no sense of self or subjectivity to begin with, and perhaps he was moaning loudly to be heard by others such that he can acquire a sense of existence. I got this interpretation from Kafka's description of a struggle, where a person explains why he prays loudly in church. He says, "One fears a number of things, that one's body would vanish, that human beings may be really what they appear to be at twilight, that no one might be allowed to walk without a stick, that it might be a good idea to go to church and pray loudly at the top of one's voice in order to be looked at and acquire a body." Escape from self. The narrator wants to hide from people, but more so, he wants to hide from himself. In the later part of the book, he says that he is insufferably oppressed by the presence of Lisa, the young lady whom he likes. He wants to hold up a veil, a persona, to avoid facing himself in the face of another person. The narrator reasons to himself that the others will compromise his being, but he is the person who is compromising his own being, since he is holding on to the appearance that he is keeping without facing himself. He claims to want autonomy and freedom, but he is afraid of his own subjectivity. Ironically, him turning from his subjectivity makes him turn to external standards for self-validation. He confesses that he had a sickly dread, too, of being ridiculous, and so had a slavish passion for the conventional in everything external. In wanting to deny external standards, he inevitably caves into them because he does not have any identity. At a point in time where he wants to confront the officer face to face, he is so concerned about the coat that he is wearing to see the officer. He thinks that his current coat does not make him look presentable, and hence he borrows money to change the mean-looking raccoon into a handsome beaver. As if anyone cares. We can notice the contradictions in the narrator. On the one hand, he does not want to be defined by other people. On the other hand, he wants external validation. On the one hand, he is insecure about himself. On the other hand, there is this inflated sense of self-importance that people actually care to notice details of him. I myself have conflicting thoughts and feelings most of the time too. So I thought it would be interesting to examine what's going on in the narrator's head to gain some insight into my own. Like the narrator, I do not want to be bound by social expectations, but sometimes I find it difficult to have a place if I do not check all the boxes of what is expected of me or what I deem expected of me. I guess it is unhelpful to think of human freedom as an unbounded nothing. We have to get over our fears of being defined because our existence is contained. It is contained in biological needs, culture, space, time, and many other things. Yet this container changes constantly, and it would be foolish to try to fix a container in a shape by checking boxes of the best form. Perhaps freedom is to confront changes with open arms, without narcissism and entitlement. Being open to change is easier said than done because change is scary. We have to leave behind what we have spent time and effort constructing for another different project, and it's painful to leave behind an identity that we have built to start all over again. It is enticing to hide behind a false view of certainty, like external standards such as a coat with a handsome beaver or a persona with thrills and flourishes to escape the unpredictability of life. But we are not entitled to a pain-free existence, are we? Yet, in the midst of constant and painful changes in life, there are beautiful moments to capture, and we have to think ourselves deserving of these moments. We do not deserve everything, but we deserve something, not nothing. That's all for today. Rewriting this analysis has been a self-reflective exercise for me. I hope it sparks some new thoughts in you and that you'll give the book a read. See you.